So, when you think of Franz Kafka, you probably picture some old, black and white photo of a super serious, kind of depressing guy, right? Well, forget all that. It turns out Kafka might just be the most relatable person for our crazy, anxious times. So yeah, let's dive into the surprisingly viral life of Gen Z's original sad boy.
Okay, so just imagine this for a second. You wake up one morning, and you're not just hungover, you are a giant bug. Like full-on exoskeleton, tons of little legs, the whole deal. And your very first thought isn't, "What is happening?" or "Oh my God, I'm a bug." Nope, it's, "Ugh, how am I gonna get to work?" That's literally the start of his most famous story, the Metamorphosis, and it just tells you everything you need to know about his vibe.
I mean, does that hit a little too close to home? That feeling, that deep, nagging anxiety that your entire self-worth is wrapped up in how productive you are, even when your personal life is a complete dumpster fire, or, you've turned into an insect. That's what makes Kafka feel so weirdly current. But to really get his work, you gotta get the man. So let's rewind a bit.
See, to understand Kafka, you just have to know that his whole life was basically defined by not fitting in. And that all started with the most important person in his world, his dad. This right here, this basically sums up the entire problem. You've got his dad, Herman, who is a total alpha, a self-made businessman, big, strong, loud, just a force of nature. And then you have Franz, quiet, shy, bookish, sensitive. His dad literally called him a little man. It was a constant clash, and let's be real, Franz never stood a chance.
You know, Kafka was actually a huge science nerd. He got into a great university to study chemistry. But his dad? No way. He thought it was completely useless. He wanted a son who was a lawyer, someone who could take over the family business and, finally be a man. So Kafka did what so many of us do with intense parents. He caved. He dropped chemistry and switched to law.
And surprise, surprise, he got the law degree, but he absolutely despised the job. The endless paperwork, the bureaucracy, it was soul-crushing. Turns out, giving up on your own passion to make someone else happy doesn't exactly lead to fulfillment. Who knew? Writing was his only escape. It was the only thing that kept him sane.
And of course, all this family drama completely wrecked his love life. The guy was constantly getting engaged. He'd propose, then get scared and back out. Then he'd do it again, and then just disappear. A total ghoster. It's classic daddy issues, right? He was terrified of commitment because he saw marriage as just another trap, and he was completely convinced he wasn't good enough for anyone anyway. So his last few years were just this wild mix of incredible genius and total tragedy. In 1912, in one insane burst of energy, he writes the Metamorphosis in a single night. Just 5 years later, he gets diagnosed with tuberculosis. He does find a little bit of happiness near the end with a woman named Dora Diamant, but the disease is just brutal. It moves to his throat and he can't eat. In 1924, Franz Kafka dies of starvation. He was only 40 years old. But believe it or not, his death is not the end of the story. It's actually where things get really crazy. There's a massive plot twist, and it's all about his life's work and his best friend.
Okay, so try to picture this. Kafka's on his deathbed. He's incredibly weak, he's published almost nothing, and he's filled with doubt about his own writing. He turns to his best friend in the world, a guy named Max Brod, and asks for one last thing.
His final request was simple and just heartbreaking. Burn it all. Every single thing. His novels, his stories, his private diaries, everything. He wanted it all to just go up in flames. He was so convinced his work was worthless that he wanted to literally be erased from history.
I mean, seriously, what would you do? Your best friend, who you know is a genius, is begging you on his deathbed to destroy his entire legacy.
Max Brod probably looked his dying friend right in the eye, promised he'd do it, and then did the exact opposite. He published everything. Let that sink in. The only reason we even know who Franz Kafka is today is because his best friend completely betrayed his final wish. It's wild.
So, okay, the backstory is insane, but why are his ideas suddenly blowing up on TikTok and social media, like 100 years later? Let's get into the themes that just hit so hard today.
First up, this whole idea that productivity equals your self-worth. We're all drowning in hustle culture, right? Life hacks, morning routines. If you have an unproductive day, you feel like a total failure. That panic the bug guy Gregor feels about missing work, that's our panic about not getting through our to-do list. Kafka saw it a century ago. In our world, if you aren't creating or earning, you basically don't exist. Next up, alienation. So Kafka was a German-speaking Jew living in Prague, which is a Czech city.
He never really fit in with the Germans or the Czechs, or even fully with his own Jewish community. He was an outsider no matter where he went. And that feeling of being disconnected, of scrolling through social media but feeling totally alone, yeah, that's still a huge mood.
And this just shows how far it's gone. We're so lonely that people are literally trying to build relationships with AI. Some guy actually proposed to ChatGPT. And look, it's kind of funny, but it's also a pretty big red flag about a deeper problem, right? Kafka wrote about a world where real human connection felt impossible. And honestly, it's never felt more relevant. And finally, it always comes back to family pressure. Kafka's whole existence was this constant struggle because he just wasn't the son his dad wanted him to be. He could never, ever fit into that mold his father built for him. And that feeling of disappointing your parents or just not living up to their vision for you, that is such a universal, painful thing that so many people are still dealing with.
So we're left with this question, and it's just as messy and complicated as Kafka's own stories. If your best friend was a total genius, but wanted to be completely forgotten, what would you do? Would you honor their wish, or would you betray them for the sake of art and history? It's a choice between personal loyalty and a greater legacy. And it's right there, in that messy, gray area, that Kafka lives on.